Good evening, welcome to Lateline. I'm Tony Jones. Well, also tonight, a special report by Suzanne Smith on the devastating plague of fetal alcohol syndrome in the remote Indigenous community of Halls Creek in Western Australia and the out-of-control drinking culture that causes it. A culture so perverse that the local hotel maintains a fortified compound known locally as the Animal Bar.
Well, obviously, Tony, the issue of fetal alcohol syndrome is something that I think would be just as much a concern to the alcohol industry and retailers of it as it would be to health professionals like Robin and others. The reality for us is that the abuse of alcohol in these remote and regional areas of Western Australia is endemic. We're talking about third and fourth generations of chronic alcoholism. We're talking about failures of successive state and federal governments to imply the appropriate level of intervention to stop tragic situations like fetal alcohol syndrome continuing. Now, I was a member of the Federal Minister for Health's National Expert Advisory Committee of Alcohol back in 2002 when we produced a major report on fetal alcohol syndrome throughout Australia. Since then, it's been the definitive publication on looking at ways to deal with and address strategies to reduce fetal alcohol syndrome. And there are many recommendations of that report that were adopted by the Australian National Council of Ministers on Drugs that have not been taken up by state and federal governments to continue the intervention necessary to stop this appalling level of fetal alcohol syndrome. And in fact, Australia has one of the worst levels of fetal alcohol syndrome in some of these areas. And as an industry, we're highly concerned about the level of abuse.
OK, to sum up, you believe the responsibility lies with state, federal and territory governments, but not with the people who sell alcohol to pregnant women, is that right?
No, that's not correct. We do believe that as an industry we obviously have responsibilities on the sale of alcohol where we know there are problems in terms of those that are directly consuming it. Where alcohol is supplied by third and fourth parties, obviously to pregnant women and to others, we have no control over that situation. The issue for the industry is one where we have a certain level of responsibility, but what people do with the product beyond that and who they then supply it to is totally out of our control, and that's the problem that we face.
Robin Long, what do you say to that, and where do you think the responsibility lies or should lie?
The reality is that the licensees and the hotel people, they're the ones selling the grog in the first place, so they should take responsibility for alcohol problems in our community and any other community, because at the end of the day, the people hand the money to them, hand the grog over the counter, and that's what happens. That's the reality. And you can blame whoever you like, but at the end of the day, they're the people that are selling the grog to all these people.
Bradley Wood?
Well, I suppose, Tony, the problem for us is that we've got people living in Halls Creek that continually know that they are abusing alcohol, that they are continually getting drunk to the level of intoxication where they are abusing their own children, where they are consuming at such high risks of alcohol intoxication that they're destroying their own bodies and that of their unborn children as well. That why is it that state and federal governments or other health authorities continue to fail to provide the right level of education for these people to save themselves? Now, as an industry, we're in a very difficult situation. We get told by legal services that if we discriminate based on our perception of how the product might be used, that we'll be up for various charges. And then if we do sell it, then we could also potentially be charged with other types of misdemeanours as well. As retailers of alcohol, we supply not only to local population, but to many tourists and many travellers moving through these quite iconic parts of Western Australia. Just remember, these are the parts of Australia that were recently featured in the movie Australia. And we're talking about major tourism
We'll come
areas.
in some more detail to that and what actually happens in Halls Creek in particular in a moment. First of all, a bit about what happens in Halls Creek and particularly at the Kimberley Hotel. Now, you're well aware of the Animal Bar, Robin Long. Tell us why it's called the Animal Bar.
Because they think that the Aboriginal people are animals and that they act like animals and they would like to treat them like animals. My understanding is that Animal Bar was supposed to be closed down, and from what I'm hearing, it is still open and still being called the animal bar, which is disgraceful.
Do you find it hard to defend the existence of a place called or known as the Animal Bar?
Tony, I think that the locals use the term the animal bar. I don't think...
Well, it was actually put to the
hotel calls
proprietor
itself.
by our reporter, and he didn't demur. He understood that's
Yeah.
what it was called. He didn't say it's not the Animal Bar.
Yeah. Look, at the end of the day,
animal-
what we do have is we have a situation where there are people who are seeking to drink continuously. The question comes down to, even if you shut the hotel down altogether, what happens to chronic alcoholics that are still seeking alcohol on a daily basis to the point of writing themselves off?
But do you
That's the
seriously, can
challenge.
I interrupt there? Do you seriously believe the Animal Bar is a place designed for responsible drinking in a licensed premises?
Tony, look, the question of serving people who are drunk is a question that I believe the police in Halls Creek have addressed in the past, are addressing now, and if it's continuing that people are being served alcohol in that bar when they are drunk, then it shouldn't continue. The licensee shouldn't allow it to continue, and the police obviously have the power to step in. However, the point of this question of the animal bar, I mean, I certainly would not want to go around the place referring to any bar as the animal bar, let alone one in a regional remote part of the state
Well,
that has
let me.
massive problems,
In
like-
fact, indeed, it is not. In fact, only adults who are served there. I mean, it was proved in court just recently. The Kimberley Hotel was fined, in fact, when police found a heavily intoxicated 14-year-old girl drinking at the Animal Bar. She'd had 6 cans of full-strength beer in a little over an hour. Now, I can't say whether this is happening all the time, but perhaps we can actually hear the answer to that from Robin Long. Robin Long, do you know whether young people habitually are drinking heavily and whether many of them, like this young girl, use the Animal Bar?
There are a lot of young people drinking in Halls Creek, and I believe that some of them do end up in the Animal Bar.
Listening to what you're hearing there, is there any excuse at all, any, that you can think of for not having the same restrictions in Halls Creek that they have in Fitzroy Crossing?
Well, I suppose, Tony, the reality is that the Fitzroy Crossing restrictions saw, and Robin would know this, saw around 140 to 150 individuals from that area move simply out of the town, abandon children, move up to Derby and Broome, drinking on the streets. There have been a whole range of issues looked at in relation to Halls Creek, and we don't believe, nor do a range of other respected parties, including Lieutenant General John Sanderson's own committee who's looking at this issue of Indigenous health in the Northwest, believe that banning alcohol in isolation is the solution. It needs a complementary range of a whole range of strategies, and that starts with state and federal governments taking the issue of Indigenous health seriously. I mean, the Royal Commission that we had into 20-odd deaths into Fitzroy Crossing last year, council representing all of those families called for a Royal Commission into the health of the Indigenous populations in the Kimberley. That is a starting point to get a proper independent assessment of health and health services.
Okay, but that will take.
regions.
We're nearly out of time, and that will take a very long time to have a Royal Commission.
Well,
it may be a worthy thing to do, but why not stop or restrict the use of alcohol, the sale of alcohol in Halls Creek, as the people there appear to want, and see if that works to stop violence and abuse and to stop fetal alcohol syndrome, as it evidently appears to be working in Fitzroy Crossing?
Simply banning the legal sale of alcohol will not stop the illegal sale and the sly grogging that goes on now, that will continue to go on in the future. You need to have a controlled mechanism for the sale of alcohol. Otherwise, as Robin knows, the very people who will sell alcohol illegally, the very people who will bring it in from the other towns and supply it to these chronic alcoholics are members of their own families themselves.
All right,
this is the